the emergency alarm starts screaming. And here's the kicker, it's not a prison riot. It's something much, much worse. Just outside those reinforced steel gates, desperate, terrified screams start echoing through the corridors. The actual structural integrity of the building is groaning and giving way. And the prisoners inside, they're realizing with absolute horror that whatever is trying to get in is far deadlier than the men with guns keeping them inside. Is anyone there? Open the door. There are monsters out here. Help us. You can just hear the sheer, unadulterated panic in those shouts. As the prison security grid completely collapses, the inmates actually manage to break out. Among them is a guy on death row named Wu Chuan. He seizes this golden, chaotic opportunity to escape into the outside world. But the absolute second he steps foot onto the streets of South City, he realizes a terrifying truth. That heavily armed prison, it might have actually been the safest place left on Earth. The streets are literally a war zone of thick smoke, crushed cars, and blood. So as we dive into this explainer, it really begs a chilling question. What happens when nature's ultimate predators decide to just take back the concrete jungle? Because as we're gonna see, this isn't just some random chaotic monster attack. There is a devastating cold logic to this apocalypse. To really understand what is tearing this city apart, we have to listen to the terrified survivors who've holed up in a nearby commercial building. Because among them is a professional marine biologist, and he realizes exactly what kind of nightmare has just descended upon them. Let's break down the biological profile of our first threat, because it is terrifying. The marine biologist identifies these things as six-eyed flying fish. But forget whatever you're picturing, right? These aren't your typical ocean dwellers. These are massive, heavily mutated predators. We're talking fleshy wings right above their pectoral fins and literal extra pairs of eyes. But here's the detail that will absolutely freeze your blood. Their olfactory nervous system is 10 times more powerful than a great white shark's. To put that in perspective, the biologist warns the group that these creatures can detect a single drop of fresh blood from over 5 kilometers away. And worse, they hunt in massive, frenzied swarms. And then, the fragile piece is shattered. A deafening roar of wings, bone-chilling screeches, glass shatters, thick concrete actually crumbles. The mutated flying fish crush directly through the shelter walls. It is an absolute slaughterhouse in seconds. These creatures have a bite force capable of ripping massive chunks of flesh, and they just descend on the panicked crowd. The survivors are scattered, screaming in pure agony as the horrifying realization finally sets in. Humans are no longer at the top of the food chain. We are prey. Now, amidst this absolute horror, human psychology fractures in some genuinely fascinating and bizarre ways. We see this incredibly arrogant cultist step forward, just completely ignoring the immediate danger. He actually raises his hands toward a snapping, blood-soaked monster fish and shouts, "The energy voice of Master Mio 10 is purifying you! Go home!" I mean, no way, right? And it gets even more absurd. When a microwave in the room inexplicably turns on and starts buzzing, this cultist actually blames the terrified survivors. He claims their heavy sins and killing intent somehow turned on the electricity, disrupted the cosmic light, and brought nature's vengeance down on them. It's this dark, almost comedic look at how desperate people will cling to absolute delusions when the world is ending. But while the cultist is literally praying to a microwave, an eccentric scientist named CK takes a completely different approach. He grabs a piece of chalk and starts furiously writing complex, nonsensical math on a dusty chalkboard. We're talking Avogadro's constant, infinite dimensions, macroscopic predictability, just total gibberish. Why is he doing this? Simply to grab the panicked survivors' attention. Once they're all staring at him, totally annoyed and confused, he drops the act. He looks right at them and says, "Now that you're looking, what I am about to say next is the real deal." CK pulls out this audio device. It's recording overloaded infrasound frequencies rumbling up from the city's drainage systems. The ground literally begins to vibrate beneath their feet. The sky outside darkens, and CK reveals the truly horrifying reality. The flying fish? They were just the vanguard. The absolute ruler of Fushing Island has arrived, the Pangu King Snake, an ancient, Titan-class apex predator with 3 times the lung capacity and muscle mass of a fully grown Siberian tiger. The ultimate monster is slithering through the concrete jungle right now, crushing steel skyscrapers like they're made of glass. If we break down these two threats side by side, it really paints a picture of total annihilation. On one hand, you have the 6-eyed flying fish. They're pack hunters. They rely on that insane blood scent tracking from miles away, which results in swarm mutilation. Basically, if you bleed, you die. But the Pangu King Snake, it is a solitary titan. Its threat level isn't just mutilation, it's total city destruction. And its hunting method is a complete game changer. It relies heavily on thermoregulation and infrared thermal tracking. It doesn't need to smell your blood, it sees your body heat. Suddenly, the power completely cuts out. A suffocating, unnatural heat fills the room. From the ceiling vents right above them, this deep, low-frequency vibration starts rattling their bones. CK violently whispers for everyone to freeze. If they stay completely, perfectly still, they might just blend into the background heat signature. Through the broken ceiling panels, a massive, scaly snout descends. A massive, fork-like tongue flicks out, tasting the air just inches from their terrified faces. One flinch, one panicked breath, and the Titan will swallow them whole. Miraculously, they hold perfectly still, and the colossal serpent slowly retracts back into the shadows. But as soon as that immediate, paralyzing danger passes, the survivors' true colors really start to show. The shelter is suddenly breached again by smaller mutants, and who steps up to the plate? It's not the respectable citizens, it's Wu Chuan, the escaped death row inmate. Using the heavy iron chains of his own handcuffs, he brutally smashes the monsters, fighting with this incredible, ruthless efficiency to save the group. And how do they repay him? The moment they recognize his face from the morning news, the crowd, totally fueled by prejudice and cowardice, demands he be thrown out to the monsters. They're terrified he'll murder them for their resources. It's a crazy shift in dynamics. With a shelter compromised, the group is forced to make a desperate run for a transport truck outside. And again, the selfish citizens show their true nature. They hijack the cabin, slam on the gas, and try to abandon everyone else. Wu Chuan has to absolutely sprint, grab onto the accelerating truck, and physically swing himself and a young rookie cop aboard. But the nightmare is far from over. A massive crash rattles the entire chassis. Emerging from the dense, choking smoke on the highway is the Pangu King Snake. Slithering at unbelievable speeds, it effortlessly crushes abandoned cars and snaps light poles like twigs. The ancient serpent has locked onto the truck's thermal trail, bearing down on them like a living freight train of scales and muscle. Okay, so here's where the story of this explainer pivots from a straight-up monster thriller into something much, much deeper. Looking at a GPS, the scientist CK realizes this isn't some random chase. The giant snake is heading directly for a very specific target, District 5, home to the Rihui chemical factory. 10 years ago, that factory started illegally dumping toxic waste. That waste poisoned the underground waters of Fushing Island. These mutated creatures, they basically followed the toxic warm currents across the Pacific, infiltrated the city drainage, and are now heading straight for the source of their agony. CK completely hits the nail on the head here. He tells the group, "We didn't just stumble into an apocalypse. We actively manufactured it." The monsters didn't just wake up and decide to conquer a city. They were driven from their homes. They followed the chemical scent trail backward, tracking the very poison that tortured their species right back to the men who poured it. The Pangu King Snake isn't just a monster. It is nature's ultimate weapon of vengeance. Let's look at the actual crimes here. For a solid decade, the Rihui chemical factory engaged in illegal industrial dumping. They pumped highly concentrated toxic wastewater, heavy metals, and untested chemical mutagens directly into the water table, all to save a buck. They literally created this nightmare. And upon hearing this, Wu Chuan's blood runs ice cold, because his mother, an innocent, hardworking sanitation worker, is currently trapped working the night shift inside that exact factory facility. As the monster rapidly approaches the factory, we get this stark, maddening contrast in humanity. Up in the pristine executive suites, the corrupt factory manager is frantically packing duffel bags full of extortion cash. He's screaming on the phone for his hush money while intentionally locking the sanitation workers, including Wu Chuan's mother, down in the toxic basement to prevent the fumes from reaching his office. On the flip side, you have Wu Chuan, the guy society labeled a criminal. He completely abandons his only chance at freedom, sprinting directly into the doomed burning factory alongside the rookie cop to save innocent lives. And then, the reckoning finally arrives. The massive Pangu King Snake breaches the factory perimeter. The sheer, unstoppable force of the Titan tears through the chemical storage tanks, triggering these deafening explosions and massive chain reactions of fire and toxic gas. The corrupt manager tries to sprint away with his heavy bags of bloody money, but the collapsing steel and concrete of his own corrupted empire crush him instantly. A decade of pure greed just instantly buried under the rubble of nature's fury. Meanwhile, deep down in the basement, Wu Chen finds the locked bulkhead door. His mother and her crew are rapidly suffocating from the leaking gas, and the only way to open those doors is a manual lever located inside a flooded high-voltage control room. Without hesitation, Wu Chuan wades into the deadly electrified water. Violent electrical arcs absolutely tear through his body. Screaming in immense, unimaginable agony, he pushes through the blinding pain, reaches that rusted lever, and forces it down. The doors hiss open. He saves his mother, he saves the workers, and he collapses into the toxic water, sacrificing himself. 24. That is the number of grueling, bloody hours the military siege lasted, before the heavy tactical units finally locked down the industrial sector and neutralized the biological threat. The city is left in absolute ruins, but the nightmare is finally contained, and almost immediately, a massive cleanup and environmental restoration project has to be launched. But I know you're wondering, what about Wu Chuan? Well, days later in a refugee camp, that rookie cop finds a young child holding a digital camera. It turns out this kid had been recording during the initial outbreak, and the footage is an absolute revelation. Not only does it show Wu Chuan single-handedly fighting off the mutants to save those ungrateful citizens, but it also contains hard evidence of his past. The video proves his original murder charge was a complete frame-up. It was a corrupt corporate cover-up by Rihui thugs because Wu Chuan had stepped in to protect an innocent person years ago. He was never a murderer. He was always a protector. With that undeniable video evidence and recovered corporate logs, Wu Chuan is fully exonerated. He miraculously survives and is reunited with his mother in the sunlight.